Good morning, everybody. Rick Steele here with another betting tips video for you here on the YouTube channel. We're going to deal with two topics at hand. And one of the topics we're going to discuss is adjustments that you need to make halfway through a sports season. Now, we're going to relate it to football because we're just past the midway point of that particular sport. But most of the details and items that I discuss can be related to the other sports that we handicap as well. And we're also going to talk about the concept of recency bias. One brief moment. However, if you would like to bet what I bet on a daily basis, well, there's two ways you can do so to get my picks, which are always free. No gimmicks, no signups, no BS, and total transparency. My records are updated, broken down by sport on a daily basis. Go to the homepage of my website, pshltd.com, click on the Today's Picks button. Follow me on the Betstamp app. My username there is Rick S, so search me up. Turn on the notifications. Each and every time I post a new pick, make a bet, you will find out. It will be alerted to your phone right away. In addition, follow me across social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. My handle is @RickSteele99. That will give you all the latest sports betting news in a timely fashion. And it's also going to allow you the best way to communicate with me through those platforms if you have any questions. Most of all, though, all that I ever ask for in return, spending the time and money to produce these videos, obviously, put you on a few more winners, help you to avoid some losers, but most importantly are these betting tips videos, giving you the nuts and bolts, the tools and techniques to become a more profitable long-term sports bettor. What I ask for only is allowing me to continue to produce these videos is to simply subscribe to the channel, which is PSH Sports Picks, turn on the notifications to your benefit. You will never miss another pick or betting tips video. So I thank you in advance for that support. So let's jump into the topics at hand. And like most of the things on social media, especially as it relates to sports betting, a lot of misnomers, mistruths, or outright lies, or just bad education and knowledge. And a lot of bettors feel that as you get to the midway point and beyond, all the value's gone, right? The lines are really tight, and you might as well get on to the next sport because there's no use betting this particular sport. Well, like usual, perception is reality to a lot of people. It's just not actually true. So let's break it down into a few key components. Stats and information, right? There's more stats. Yes, personality of teams, strengths and weaknesses have been established. The information is available for obviously the sports books and the bettor themselves. In other words, the marketplace. Teams can easily be identified now, right? Not like the beginning of the year. However, what stats are real? What are the strengths in relation to each individual team and weaknesses? I mean, stats that took place as we related to football back in September, not really relevant anymore. Maybe you had some key injuries on that team. The quarterback was out for a long period of time, etc., etc. Another thing that plays into those particular pieces of information is analyzing the strength of schedule of teams. Perhaps a team looks really, really strong defensively, but most of the year they've gone against weak offenses. So all of that has to be taken into account in regard to your handicapping. What teams will go through a positive regression as we head down the stretch? What teams will go through a negative regression? Things that you have to investigate and handicap. These are all areas that, off of public misconceptions, that you could capitalize on that were not available at the beginning of the year. Another thing to consider is weather, right? We head into this stretch, the weather becomes a bigger issue. Cold weather. More importantly, because cold weather is not that relevant, even snow isn't that relevant, it's wind. That's the cutoff. That's what you got to look for as far as handicapping totals are concerned. And specifically, anything over 20 miles per hour as far as wind is concerned will have an impact as far as the game and scoring is concerned. But not just on totals, take into account the spreads. Are you willing to lay points when a game has a total in the low to mid 30s? Those points are much more valuable. I'm not saying not to lay it. I'm saying you have to take that into account. A weak punter becomes more of an issue, obviously, with strong wind. A team more dependent on the pass as opposed to the rushing game will have a larger impact on them. So you have to take that into account. How about a warm weather team that's traveling to a cold weather area for that given week? Again, all factors that probably weren't prevalent at the beginning of the year, and now don't overlook them like a lot of the marketplace will do so. Injuries, right? Very easy to handicap when you got high profile injuries. Those are already baked into the line. You can almost ignore them. Especially with football, though, it's such a brutal physical game from week to week, right? So look for injuries that stay under the radar, but are still very important. Offensive line, defensive lines, and the center position. Cluster injuries where more than one is present in a particular area, especially, for example, a team's secondary. In some instances, the team could be going 3 or 4 levels deep on particular positions. So you have to look at the depth charts of individual teams. An injury alone is not a standalone tool to play, obviously, on a team and find weakness on a line. How much of a drop-off is it from the starter to the next player, right? Okay, we take an obvious example, Rodgers on the Jets versus then we go to Zach Wilson. Big drop-off. But if we go to Carr for New Orleans versus Winston, yeah, there's still a drop-off, but it's not as dramatic. So you have to take into account how much of the line has been adjusted and whether it's been over-adjusted or not, because that often has a tendency to take place. Especially important as well these days as far as NBA and injury/load management is concerned. Coaching, another thing to take into account, right? Who are the coaches that excel in the second half? Coaches who know how to make adjustments and adapt to their team's personalities and strengths. Conversely, teams that have underperformed and now the coach is on the firing line. Does the pressure change his approach? Have the players quit on him? So all things to take into account in the coaching arena side of things. Now, teams that are playing out the stretch, right? We always love to bet on teams that are playing the spoiler role, and that is a relevant way to look at something as far as handicapping is concerned. How often is the line overestimated because a team needs to win? Just because they need to win doesn't mean that they're going to win, and more importantly, that they're going to cover. Now, football, as we know, is the most physical and emotional game that we handicap. So the undermanned big dog that was competing earlier in the season, despite being down big in a game, especially at home, a lot of times they run out of gas. They just don't have the mental fortitude and energy towards the end of the year to battle at the same way they would have at the beginning of the year. So teams and players quit all the time, especially later in the season, regardless of the fact of what you may hear, that they're playing for next year's contracts, etc., etc. However, again, you have to identify where those soft spots are. In the technology age that we live in, Joe Public, the line maker, the sports book, and the professional full-time bettor have access literally to all the same information. It's how we access, interpret, utilize this knowledge to calculate value, which will ultimately determine if you're profitable or not in the long term. Now, another concept I want to cover before we wrap this one up is to avoid recency bias. So what exactly does recency bias mean in relation to sports betting? With a full menu of sports that are going on, especially now at this time of the calendar, it's a good time to remind ourselves the danger of overreacting, right? In other words, we don't want to be a Joe, we want to be a pro. Bettors remember the most recent games and results and draw conclusions for their next bets based on this information. In the NFL, That's one lousy game. In other sports, it's one lousy week. It does not matter how good or bad a team is. Each team is always going to have ups and downs throughout the season. So don't overreact to those short-term results. In fact, most of the time, the value is going to be on the team that's in a bounce-back situation. So that's what you want to look for as far as the value is concerned. Matchups and situations dictate new evaluations every week and every game. Put last game biases aside and don't obviously take that as your sole criteria for betting on or against that team in the next game. No team looks as good as they do when they win, and no team looks that bad when they lose as well. So again, keep your analysis to objective statistical analysis. Establish a line and then massage that line for the intangibles that we've talked about on other betting tips videos. By the way, I highly recommend, because these aren't as time sensitive, obviously, as the picks videos, go back, re-review the library in the betting tips area. You'll pick up some additional knowledge in the areas and topics that you think are necessary. Remember, pros bet numbers, Joes bet teams. Pros only bet when they have value. Joes need action. Pros protect their bankroll, only risking a small fraction of their bankroll. Joes risk too much on individual games. Pros will handle losing streaks and bad beats as they are established and definitely available and do arrive. Not that it's pleasant and enjoyable, but we all are exposed to those kind of situations. So the pros will stay calm, belief in their process, while the Joes will go on tilt chasing their losses. Be a pro, not a Joe. And may all the winners this weekend be yours.